Welcome back to The Shed. Today I would like to share with you the 1968 Hugo award-winning novel by Roger Zelazny, The Lord of Light. So what I would like to do, as always, is provide a bit of a plot overview, talk to what I liked, what I didn't like. I'll put it to the memory test, we'll make some recommendations, and I'll rank it on our ever-growing sci-fi shed ladder. Now, what's really interesting about this is that I pride myself in not providing spoilers to ruin your reading experience. And I do my best. I'm not always successful, but I really do my best not to provide spoilers. But I would have to say that with this novel, I feel that some of the things that I may be considered spoilers will actually add to your reading experience. I definitely found that to be the case with this novel. I find that this is one of those novels that definitely gets better on a second or third or fourth reading. And what I'll be talking to, some may consider spoilers, but I honestly feel it will add to your reading experience. So what happens is that we have this starship called the Star of India, and it's colonized this planet. And what has happened with those the first starmen, the star-faring people, have sort of used technology to gain powers, basically aspects they're referred to in the novel, and that sort of take on these superpowers almost, so much so that the inhabitants, the native inhabitants of the planet, these energy beings, actually see these first as gods, right? They're taking on these Hindu spiritual deity god features upon themselves. So because of their Hindu background, they've taken on all these Hindu deity in both aspects, their powers, and also controlling the resurrection process. So these native life forms are sort of held hostage to the greater technological advancements of these starfaring Star of India crewmates. So the novel is really written in 7 novelettes. It's a fix-up novel in some ways. I think two of the stories in the novel were actually released as novelettes or short stories. So it is a fix-up novel, and what we learn through reading these 7 individual stories is that there's one of the main first godlike omnipotent creatures that they've become in a guy called Mahasamatman, but as he would rather be preferred to be called, Sam. So we have Sam, who's sort of growing, he's disillusioned by the rising of these gods, right? He's sort of looking at these, and he's actually one of the last accelerationists. And what these accelerationists are looking to do is actually say, you know what, this technology and this afterlife shouldn't be held to ones like us, gods, overruling these creatures, these life forms, and humanity as a whole, but should be shared by everyone. So the 7 stories really tell of Sam's birth and rebirth, his background, him starting a religion, and making allies and enemies and allies of these different gods to ultimately what will be the fate of the colonists and the people on this planet. So what is it that I really liked? I really enjoyed the concept. I really enjoyed the concept of this starship, the Star of India, traveling through space, colonizing this planet, and being made up of a majority of Hindu crewmates, take on all these technological advancements to build themselves up into this godhood, right? I really enjoyed the concept. I thought it was really fascinating how sometimes, technology like this would be seen by different alien life forms as almost a god. And it was really interesting to see that this crew decided to take on those aspects of these Hindu deities to reign over these people. So I thought it was a really complicated, really complex concept that I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, I was a sucker for that. I've mentioned it in the past. I like it when science fiction blends religion and science and comes up with these kind of really plausible and imaginative worlds. And I sort of really enjoyed that aspect of it. The other thing I really enjoyed is the complexity that you have in this novel. I mean, so many times it feels like you're reading this archaic religious text that you've just uncovered from an archaeological dig, right? It has that sort of quality to it. And sometimes it feels and reads like a myth. It's somewhat akin to what we find with Samuel R. Delaney's The Einstein Intersection, if you've read that novel. I get similar vibes to that. Like, it's sort of interesting blend of myth and religion and science fiction and fantasy, which I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed the way this universe is revealed to us. I like the way which I sort of alluded to in my introduction, right? That concept, I like the way it was revealed to us through all these short stories that I found rather entertaining and very well done as well. So what is it that I didn't like? Look, this novel seems to have a cast of thousands, right? We have so many characters. I think it's like 6 or 7 main characters throughout the plot that sort of come up that you need to sort of keep record of who's who. And what's interesting is that these deities sort of have different allegiances throughout the novel that you sort of got to keep in mind as well. And there seems to be double that again in minor characters as well. And sometimes these characters also change sexes throughout the narrative, which sort of makes it even more puzzling. So it does become a little difficult to follow at times when you compound all of that with alternating timelines and disjointed timelines. So I'd have to say sometimes that gets a little bit hard to follow. The other thing some readers may find difficult is that this novel does have a lot of Hindu references, right? I mean, these crewmates set themselves up as gods, so you're going to get a lot of Hindu storytelling in this novel, which I thought I really enjoyed. I mean, I like studying comparative religions, and for me, it's one of those things that I really enjoy. But there is a lot of that in the novel, and it may deter some readers. So come in with eyes wide open. It's not preachy or anything like that at all. Don't get me wrong. But there is a lot of Hindu context, a lot of, and these gods all have different aspects. And unless you're somewhat familiar with Hinduism, or you don't have, or you have at least some kind of interest in it, it may deter some readers. So just a little bit of a caveat there for you. The other thing that I would say is that the novel is definitely disjointed, right? It reminds me of Roger, Samuel R. Delany, rather, his Einstein intersection novel, right? Because he has that blend of myth and science fiction and fantasy all sort of muddled up. And sometimes this novel reads like that. So it is a bit disjointed. It is a little bit hard to follow, which sort of further enforces my opinion as to why I think what I said in the intro is not really a spoiler, and why I think it really enhances it. And I would go as far as to say, get onto Wikipedia, have a look at the plot synopsis for each of those short stories, and it will help you understand what's actually going in this novel. I did that on my second reading. I read this book back to back, particularly for that, right? Because the first time I read this novel must have been 25, 30 years ago, which took straight into my memory test, actually, right? So the first time I read this novel was 25, 30 years ago, and it held really strongly in my mind, right? I really remembered the Hindu themes. I remember, Sam being the binder. But I do have an interest in these things, and that may be influencing my memory recollection of this one. But I didn't remember much of the short stories, right? The 7 short stories. I remember the overall theme, and I remember thoroughly enjoying it, but I didn't really remember much of the subplots and some of the dynamics that was going on. So I'd say that the memory test held really well. But what I did this time round, the first time round, I literally read it back to back twice. That's how much I enjoyed this one. And the first time round was like, oh yeah, that's right. And then as the story started to come back, as I started to remember exactly what's going on, I took real full enjoyment. And as an exercise, I said to myself, well, what if I was to read it back to back? What would my reading experience be then? And I've got to say, it was wonderful, right? Because I sort of knew what I was coming into. I just thoroughly enjoyed the writing the second time round. I didn't get lost into characters and what was going on, having a really good, strong understanding of what was happening. And I say that the second time round, there were millions of spoilers, right? I just literally read the novel, but I still found it actually added to my reading enjoyment and reading pleasure. So who would I recommend this novel to? I mentioned in my overview that this reminds me a lot of Samuel R. Delany's Einstein Intersection. So I'd have to say, if that novel was really appealing to you, I'd say have a go at this one. It's very similar vein, but I think it's a little bit less disjointed and a much stronger concept. The other thing I would say is that I've read online that Neil Gaiman was highly influenced by Roger Zelazny. And the novel that came to mind immediately when I saw that was American Gods by Neil Gaiman. So if you enjoyed American Gods, I'd say have a go at this. It's a different novel, very much so, but I think you would find the influences there, and you may enjoy this one as well. I hinted a couple of weeks back when I reviewed The Canticle for Leibowitz that there were certain areas in that novel that reminded me of Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. And again, that would be a recommendation as well. If you like your religious themed books, your science fiction themes to have that religious flavor, then I'd say have a go at this one. You may enjoy it as well. So there you have it. It's a very interesting novel. It's going to be really interesting to see exactly where it ranks on our sci-fi share ladder. So let me flip the cameras around and we'll take a look at it just next. So back to the share ladder and ranking the 1968 Hugo award-winning novel by Roger Zelazny, The Lord of Light. Now this is a wonderful novel, and I've got my full criteria down below that I use to rank these wonderful novels, and they're weighted input, so each one of them has slightly different weighting. But the key takeaways for me in this particular novel was the concept. That almost received full marks. I really enjoyed the concept, and I thought the execution was fair as well. I'll also say that the writing also got just about full marks. I really thoroughly enjoyed the writing. I am a Roger Zelazny fan. I do like his exposition, and it was definitely no exception in this particular novel. Some of the areas where it lost a couple of points is the plot itself. I didn't think the plot in those 7 stories, it was a little bit disjointed for me at times, and I don't think it really held my attention the way others have done on the board so far. So it lost a little bit for the plot. It lost a couple of points for the ending. It scored really well on the memory test. Again, it almost got, close to full marks for the memory test. And some of the characters, again, I don't think were just the best that we've seen on the board. So it lost a couple of points for the actual characters. And when I look at the board, I'd like to say, let's start with the Einstein intersection, which I think has got a lot of similarities. But I'd have to say that Lord of Light, that concept, for me, my humble opinion, it is much stronger than it was in the Einstein intersection. That novel, I sort of struggled at times explaining exactly what that novel was about, which I definitely don't have the problem here. So I thought the concept was definitely stronger in Lord of Light than it was in the Einstein intersection. And when I look at the rest of my weighted input criteria, I'm finding it really difficult to warrant Lord of Light's place on the bottom end of the ladder. So when it comes to the A side, a good place to start would be with This Immortal by Roger Zelazny, because that also took science fiction and Greek mythology themes and blended them together. But I found the plot to that one to flow just a little bit better, and I thought Conrad was just a really interesting character. So I got a couple of marks more because of those characters and the plot. And when I look at every other novel on the A side of the board, as much as I really enjoyed Lord of Light, and I've literally read it back to back twice for this review, that's how much I enjoyed the novel, I couldn't justify its place on the A side when I look at my criteria. Which takes us straight to the B side. And I've got to say, the B side is where it's at the moment with the Sci-Fi Shed. Because these are all wonderful novels. I mean, these are some of my favourite novels reside on the B side. We got novels like Ringworld, like The Demolished Man, like Red Mars, A Fire Upon the Deep, right? Flowers for Algernon. So the B side is a really great spot. And I think without further ado, I'm going to whack this one just below Red Mars. Great place to be, right pretty much in the middle of the bunch. Wonderful novel. I've given Red Mars the slight edge because I think that's just an epic science fiction novel, right? I really do enjoy just the world that Kim Stanley Robinson's built in Red Mars that is believable to someone who doesn't know anything about Mars or space travel. And I really liked the background and the story there. So I gave the marks to Red Mars because of the plot. I think just some areas in the plot and some of the characters were much more memorable than they were in Lord of Light. So the plot and the characters is where Red Mars got the edge. And the same can be said almost about everything else on the board. There you have it. It was an interesting one. It took me a while to come to that decision. What are your thoughts? Have you read Lord of Light? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you think it's fair to have it somewhere in the middle? Should it be? I know this book, I know several people, personal friends, that regard this novel as one of the top 10 novels of all time. And I'm not far from that. I really do enjoy the novel. but I wouldn't say it's one of my top 10 of all times. But it comes close as a personal favorite. But I think if I'm true to my criteria, that's where we end today. Do you think it should have been on the bottom end of the ladder? Do you think it should have been here at all? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And like always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down below, because I learned so much just from your comments and helps me do better reviews. So thank you, and I'll see you next time in the shed.